All right, we're live. We are, warmer than I was about a week ago, last Thursday night, as I'm sitting in Soldier Field. It's like 40 degrees, and then the wind, there's nothing blocking the wind. And then I'm wearing this sweatshirt and not nearly enough of a warm layer underneath. And I am chilled, and I have lost all of my toughness. I don't know that, I don't know where it went. I do know where it went. When I moved to Oregon for grad school, and I came back, it was gone. And it has been a very long time since I was in grad school, and I never got it back. And so, as you know, I've lost some weight, and that's not helping the toughness.
It's
Either.
helping, but it's not helping.
It's helping on a lot of things, but it's not helping in staying warm. I do not have the
No, it
natural
does. It
layer
does
that I
not.
used to. So yeah, so I'm happy that I'm inside of my house, sitting next to a space heater because this room gets pretty cold.
Yep.
The space heater is going. It has been going most of the day because it's cold here. It has kind of stayed cold since that game in the Midwest, and I think heard you guys are experiencing warm weather, and then it's going to turn here soon.
We've had some nice days, but mornings around here. This morning was the first, and you know this because you've spent time out here. This morning was the first misty morning out here, where you wake up and like you can't see the far trees because
Mm-hmm.
it's like foggy, misty. Like it's a very northwest condition, and it exists for quite a bit of the winter. And we've definitely had heavy dew and pretty chilly temperatures. We've had like high 40s, low 50s in the mornings. So it's definitely feels like fall. Leaves are coming down. They're still dry because it hasn't rained yet. Once it rains, they turn into mush, but we haven't had that yet. But this morning was the first like get up and it was like, oh, it's foggy. Look at that. So a little bit of chill in the air, certainly when it's damp like that, and feels like fall. But right now we've got smoke, which is a bummer because we've got wildfires going on. Not right where I live, but yeah, the air quality was okay this morning. And I went outside around 4:30 or 5 after I fed the dogs today, and I was like, oh, it's not okay anymore. And looked it up on my phone. The air quality is 183 for those of you familiar with the AQI, the air quality index. That is in the not healthy range. It is bad stuff. Oh, nice. Feels like fall. I'll have a Sam Adams pumpkin ale. Fair enough. It is time for brown ales. I sent JB a picture of one that I had at lunch. I got to go out to lunch with a friend I hadn't seen in a while, and small place in a redone craftsman house, and they've turned it into a restaurant with a little both bar and pub, so they have alcohol and beer. And they had a locally brewed brown on tap, and I was like, perfect, it's fall, like give me the brown. And I sent the picture to JB, not because it was visually stunning, but because the pour was
Proper pint.
immaculate. Yes, like almost bead level to the top of the glass with beer. And I was like, that is service with a smile right there.
We've been in the 40s. Today was a high of 50, and then it's going to warm up a little bit. We'll get a few days of nicer weather, but that's what happens in the Midwest. Is it just bounces around everywhere for a while.
Yeah, you
so.
get a little bit of it. You get a little bit of a bump where you're having 3 seasons in every day.
I always say that we get all the days we're supposed to. They just don't come in the order that you think they should. So, yeah, man, and 94 in SoCal. Sorry, man, that sucks.
That is not great.
No.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Well, yeah, some of you probably watched the Bear and Balance on Friday with Lester and I, and talked about the game a little bit. Being there, taking my mom, being on the rail was cool. Good experience.
Good.
Tried to do the 10-minute drill live from the stadium. I have not gone back and watched that because I'm sure it's just a travesty because it's so loud. It is so loud. I mean, they just blare the music. I could not find a space. So I don't know if I told this the next day, but I'm walking around. I'm trying to find a quieter spot. So I like go in. Well, I go in to like back where like the stairs are and stuff, underneath, and then I'm losing Robert. Like I lose my reception, right? I
Yeah.
can't, I can't connect as well. And at one point, I started going like I'm just trying to find a quiet area. I'm like, there's no one up there. This looks quiet. And I start walking up these stairs, and all of a sudden I hear, "Sir, sir," and I was like, "Whoa,
Uh-oh. I think
uh-oh,
he means
uh,
me.
someone's chasing me, and this is not good." And I was like,
And
"Oh, I was just looking for a quiet spot." "You were looking for what?" I was like, "Oh, just looking for a quiet spot. I'm sorry. I get out. I'm just trying to hear my friend here." And yeah, that was something.
okay, funny story. So, I have Irish relatives. The last time I was in Ireland was quite some time ago. The night before, we'd been in Ireland for 10 days and done a sort of semicircle around the country and went to a friend's wedding. And we're back in Dublin the night before our flight, which is out early in the morning. And it was my wife and I and my mom. My mom was like, "I'm going to stay in. I'm tired." And we're like, "Okay." And so my wife and I go out and oh, this is classic. We asked the bartender because we're kind of done. We're both needing some space and just quiet. And it was the security guard from training camp. Well played, Adam. And we said to the bartender in this fairly posh downtown Dublin bar, we're like, "Hey, we're looking for a spot, and we just kind of want to go out, and I want it to be a little bit quiet. Do you know any spot like that?" He looks at us and he goes, "No, why?" And we were like, "That's a great point." Like, for those of you that
Touche.
haven't been to Ireland, like drinking and talking is the national sport.
Right, that's what you
They have
do.
they have a name for it, and they judge bars, generally pubs, on the level of said interaction. It's the Gaelic word is crack, and it's spelled
What's
CRAIC.
the crack? Yeah.
Yeah, and if a bar doesn't have good crack, it's because it's dead and you don't go there. Like it's almost like having bad food. It's worse. And so we were basically asking for a place that had none, and he was like, "Why would I send you there? That's a terrible thing." And we were
That's
like,
awful.
yeah, just
That's
not lining up."
not understanding what you need at that point. Yeah, Adam, the security guard story from training camp. I'm sure a lot of people remember that with me and Lester. I saw him. Like he's the guy that comes out with Eberflus. So Pocket Goldberg is, yeah, like he is like
What?
the guy. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah. He came
no,
out.
I didn't realize that we'd
He was
closed the
you
circle here.
yeah, he was on the sideline like the whole time. Like he was going up and down. And at
Wow.
one point he was like watching Gil and Scales. They were kind of doing the like Gil would take a snap and he'd kind of baby punt it, like kind of pooch it over, and he was just kind of I don't know. I was watching him because now I feel like I have a relationship with this guy, and and he was just like judging them and kind of making fun of them, and I was like, "Don't you dare make fun of the guillotine!" And yeah, no,
Oh,
Bucket Goldberg was in
nemesis.
attendance. He does have a full time gig, so that is
Nemesis. That's
yeah.
hilarious. I
Yeah,
love it.
well, my blood feud with, Larry Mayer continues, so we'll,
Like Hatfields and McCoys at this point.
oh, yeah, I mean, it's real serious stuff, I assume that he reads my stuff. That's the joke, right?
Sure.
Alright,
Yeah.
yeah, right, like Larry Mayer has any idea who I am. But we're gonna have a fun podcast tonight. We got some stuff to talk about. People are already excited about your breakdown of Kyler Gordon. I didn't tell them you're breaking down Kyler Gordon, but someone said they're excited
You
about
just
Kyler
did.
Gordon.
Yeah.
Not so excited about Larry Borum. I'm the one that's breaking down Larry Borum.
I mean,
So,
shocker, right?
well,
JB's breaking down the O lineman. I mean, come on. Like,
it felt like it was time. It
yeah.
felt like it was time. So, all right. Well, let's give me a second. We'll launch into this. Welcome to Bears Over Beers. I'm Jeff Burkus, a writer from Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined by the man, EJ Snyder. We've got a really fun show tonight. I've got a special drink that I think you'll really like. But how you doing?
I'm doing great. I actually have a matching drink
excited.
to accompany the player. It very rarely happens like that for me. And this is actually a complete and total accident. But when I realized this morning, because I'd been at the store last night and I was not thinking about this, and I just picked up some stuff, and then I came home and I was like, oh, I can make a connection. So I'm excited. We're going to talk about a couple of young players that are hopefully going to be important to the Bears moving forward. They are certainly players that have garnered a lot of attention, some for good, some for bad early in the season. So as we do here on Bears Over Beers, we're going to focus on those players and break them down. And we're excited about that. So it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, so every week it seems like so I watch the game in real time, and then I'll go back and I'll watch the condensed version, and that will prep me for Bear and Balance with Lester. And then a little later in the week, I'll watch the all 22 tape and I'll focus on one player. So I have to watch this game three times. This was a little different because I was in the stadium watching the game from the 10-yard line. Again, first row is very cool. It's a very cool experience. I recommend it if you can do something like that once in your life. Maybe treat yourself. Going to the Bears is a little more expensive because they're the Bears and there's just no seats. But if you choose a Thursday night game against a bad football team, that does bring the price down a little bit relative to if you tried to go to like a Packers game on a Sunday afternoon, right? But I digress. It was a really cool experience to be there. But what I found interesting was I saw the game from one very different perspective, being in the stadium and watching it from my seat. And when I would go back and I'd watch the game either in the condensed version so that I can, watch it quickly and prep for the show, or watching in the all 22 so you get different angles, you see a lot of different things. And I was seeing things being there that I can't see at home, which I think is really cool. You can see the defensive backfield a lot better. You can see kind of the movement in the games being played. You can watch receiver route formations and patterns a little bit better than you can when you're watching from home. So there's a lot of cool stuff to be at the game. And I know a lot of you go to games or you go to a lot of games, but it is a really cool perspective every once in a while to actually try to get to a Bears game so that you can see these guys live. You can see the energy. I didn't mention this in the Bear and Balance show, but I actually thought the Bears team lacked a lot of energy. They kind of looked a little flat. Now that could have just been a Thursday game, could have been a lot of reasons, but I didn't actually see them come out with a ton of energy, and they just kind of felt grumpy the whole game. Like there was just no real positive vibe or anything. It just felt a little bit like annoyance, like just kind of a general annoyance. That's kind of how they played.
Yeah, I can't disagree with your comments about being in a stadium, having already been in a few this year in completely different both places in the country, but also places within the stadium. So saw a game at SoFi, and we were basically jacked up against the rafters. We were like 6 or 10 rows from the top of the stadium. We were way up there, but we were almost dead on the 50-yard line. So it was like watching little mini all 22. And pretty interesting because we were right there, and so you could see everything. It was really small, but you could see everything playing out. You talk about routes and patterns and all that, so you could see all that detail. You could just look up to the big video board and see that if you needed to see, who got the carry or whatever else. When I went to DKR, which is the stadium in Austin, Texas, home stadium for the Longhorns, again we were quite a ways up, a little bit more of an angle, but a similar viewing experience. And then the next day we were in AT&T for Bengals Cowboys, and we were way down near the field, closer to where you were on the rail, right on the 40-yard line, about 20 rows up, close enough to see and hear the Bengals sideline. And that's something that you hear the coaches interacting with the players, not when it's roaring, but in quieter moments. You can literally hear them when they huddle players together. You can certainly hear the quarterback's calls. You can hear some of the defenders calling out plays. It's a very, you can't see the line play as well from that low an angle, right? A lot of stuff mushed together so you lose some things, but you gain other things, and you can get a sense of energy, frustration, immediacy if they're really, under the gun to get something done. That comes through from that close, and it's really cool. But it is different. And in terms of an overall experience, I think you get a much better experience at home if you're really interested in like flow of the game and who made plays and all. We're just so used to all the extraneous information, whether it's from the announcers or in replay or with diagrams. Like a lot of that stuff's been added, and it makes the viewing experience really good at home, and you get a great sense of that. When you're live, you get like a third of that, and you get these little spike moments of clarity or extra information, which are really cool. But in terms of like what happened overall, you do miss a lot, and you got to go back and watch condensed or whatever else. But it's still game day is an experience. You go for the experience.
Yeah, it was one of those where I was back watching, like, oh, okay, that's what happened. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't really see that, and like, and
Yeah.
mentally, I was like, I'm curious what's going to happen there when I go back and watch the film. So it's just been an interesting week, and it's been a busy week, and for me, but busy couple weeks, and honestly, busy football season so far. But particularly busy for me personally, professionally, everything going on. I've got some projects that kind of coalescing at once, and so I thought, what am I going to drink tonight?
Mm.
This is kind of like the last. Tomorrow will be kind of busy, but it won't be as busy as today. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to talk to my friend EJ. EJ's a man that likes an Irish coffee.
Yes, he does.
So I'm drinking an Irish coffee, and I made my Irish coffee with little Redbreast 12.
Ooh,
Okay, so that's my whiskey, and then
nice.
not just any creamer, but let's throw some
Ooh,
Buffalo Trace bourbon cream in there.
wow.
So that's what
That
I've got tonight.
that's like an Irish
Little Irish
coffee
coffee, little
deluxe.
Irish Kentucky coffee.
Yeah, that's a whole different level right there. I had a little black barrel in my coffee this morning, one of my coffees this morning, because after I'd taken the kids to school and I was like, all right, I'm gonna fire up all 22 tape, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna ask the boss if I can have an Irish coffee. Hey boss. Yeah. You want an Irish coffee? I do. Cool. We should pour us one. So I did. Little one, but yeah, it's delicious. But I just had regular like oat milk in mine, not super fired up Kentucky bourbon cream, which is way better.
What about you?
Now I'm jealous.
You got a themed
I
beer.
do. So I was at the store last night, which is why I have the black barrel, because I was out and I was like, I need to get some. It's fall, and their fall beer selections were in, and I ran across a beer that as soon as I saw it, I said, I got to get 6 of those, because I have a friend who is very attached to the brewery because he spent some time in New Orleans. So he loves Abita beers, and I too like Abita beers, and I very rarely see this one from them. And it is their brown ale. And because I'm reviewing Kyler Gordon tonight, and Kyler Gordon played at the University of Washington,
Okay.
so he was a dog, and he's fast. And Abita's brown, and you'll love the bottle art, is called Turbo Dog. Turbo Dog brown ale from Abita Brewing in New Orleans. So we've got Kyler Gordon, we've got Turbo Dog, which is a very good brown ale. I've had it before, but not for a while, with some great bottle art, couple of eyes on the black label. Very excited for this stuff. Feels like fall. 5.6 by volume, so real drinkable, caramely, all the things that you like in a brown ale. So actually, it's a bottle, and I have my opener for once. So we're gonna do this. We haven't done this in a bit. There we go.
Yeah, no bottle opening for me tonight. So I've got a coin because we flip coins. Pictured rocks, quarter. I don't know what I used last time, but it's still
God, it's
sitting here,
so good.
might
I
have
haven't
been
had any in a long time, so it's just a perfect match for what we're doing tonight.
good. And that would be a cool nickname for somebody,
Oh, for sure.
right? Like that would be a
Turbo
cool
Dog.
nickname. All right, so heads or tails, call it.
Heads.
It is heads.
I break the streak
You're
by
on.
going away from tails.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna make you go first.
Okay.
You're gonna get all the busy out of the way first, and we'll save the DB talk for the back end of the show, just like the back end of the defense.
Perfect. So we're breaking down Kyler Gordon and Larry Borom tonight. I've got Larry Borom. Now, why in the world would I want to talk about Larry Borom? Well, we haven't talked about him yet. That's one thing. We'd like to talk about all these guys at least once or twice this year. So I'm taking the plunge into Larry. There's been a few weeks that my instinct said stay away from Larry. It didn't look like on first viewing that it was maybe the best game for him. I wanted to stay away. One thing that I was intrigued was with him this week was that Bears offensive line had a bad game. That was a bad game. Justin Fields under a lot of pressure. Justin Fields maybe creating a little bit of his own pressure, but really just from start to finish, that Washington defensive front gave the offensive line a lot of trouble. Not particularly surprising because that's a very good defensive front. There's a lot of really good players on there. We knew that going in, especially their interior players. That was going to be a key to the game. But how did Larry Borom do? Lester mentioned that he went back and graded him. He wanted to take a look at him. he gave him a grade on bear and balance, and I was like intrigued. I was intrigued because I thought, okay, that's not bad. But I also kind of wanted to go back and see if I did a grade independent of Lester's notes, what would I be able to come up with in terms of my evaluation, and how far off would that be? Lester and I have never sat down and graded film together. I don't know exactly what he's looking for, what he considers a minus play, but I have my opinion of what I think is a play that deserves a minus. And so wanted to see if we'd come close. Now, caveat up front, I did not have a chance to review all 4 quarters of this. I got basically to the Dante Pettis touchdown. That's where I got through. But what I did do was I had one additional negative for Larry Borum's score than Lester had for the entire game. So either I'm a much more difficult grader or I'm looking at something a little different. So that's kind of the first thing, just to kind of give you guys a sense of what I saw versus maybe what Lester saw. There's probably, Lester's been doing that a lot longer. I'm trying to use his system so that we have some sort of consistency when we both do something like this. But overall, just say that I had a little bit of a lower opinion of what I saw on film. So what did I see? Well, actually, let me ask you this before I get into it. Before you haven't done this on Larry Borom yet. I mean, you've watched.
Not officially.
Okay, but you've
not in this
plays
game
and
for
you've
sure.
certainly
But
not gone through and graded him the whole time. What's your kind of quick evaluation of what you feel Larry Borom is right now and what he is to this team into the future?
What he is right now is inconsistent, and I've seen a lot of other folks talking about Larry Borom this year. Even PFF this week came out and said he had a great pass grade versus the Commanders, and I was like, because again, I hadn't gone back and watched. I hadn't gone back and watched the L22, so I said, "Oh, that's okay." But certainly, the week that I looked at Khalil Herbert, you are watching Larry Borom as well because you are checking out the line, and I had focused on Borum and Mustafa. During my entire Khalil Herbert thing, I watched every run play from the end zone angle of all 22, and I looked specifically at Borum and Mustafa, and I came away largely unimpressed. There was a lot of reps that he didn't have that were great in that game. His pass blocking is better than his run blocking. He is athletic. He is not particularly stout. He can get in front of people, but he does not, for the most part, move people either in the run game or the pass game. And I think he is a talented and developing young player who would be best suited to be sitting behind a veteran right now and learning as a swing tackle. I think he's an ideal swing tackle. I think he's better in the pass game than he is in the run game right now. And I said this a couple of weeks ago. I feel like we've sort of hit the tipping point where that inconsistency is affecting the offense enough that I would like to see what Riley Reif has. And I kind of wonder if Reif is not like injured or wildly underperforming. You never know what's going on with a guy. But at this point, I'm like, why is Riley Reif not better for this offense than Larry Borom? And again, I'm not in the room. I don't know, but that's kind of my take on it from what I've seen so far.
Okay. I agree with everything you just said. As a pass pro defender, pretty solid. Like, and what I see him winning with is his frame. So I don't mean that in like I don't mean that as in he's stout. I mean that as in he has a very wide frame and he has a very quick reaction off the ball, which is not always common with a right tackle. So he gets out of his stance quickly and he has a big frame. So if somebody is going to try to run around him, they are really in a bad place because of that quick first step and because of that wide frame, they have a really long way to go around the outside. So he actually does a pretty good job of nullifying any kind of rush like that. And you see a lot of defensive ends, they'll come off the ball, they'll realize pretty quick that Borum's already beat them to the point, and they just kind of give up on the rep. And I've watched Borum before, not graded a whole game before, but like I've watched him before, and that's how I notice he wins. Like he wins with the quickness and the big frame that doesn't allow people to get around him. So that's something to start with. That's not a bad trait. Okay. Like you say, he's not stout. He's a large human being. Like I just said, he's a very wide framed person. He also has a lot of weight. Now, he's done a very good job since he's become a pro to take off a lot of the college weight that he had and remold himself, reshape himself into a professional athlete that can play a full game and be out there. But he hasn't figured out how to anchor down very well because he does have a susceptibility when those speed rushers convert into power. So he doesn't anchor quite well enough for how big he is, how much he weighs. You would expect him to be able to do that just because of mass, right? But it's kind of a optical illusion because even though he's so big, he gets pushed back pretty easily, and that allows him to collapse the pocket. So that brings me to a point where this idea of pass rush win rate or pass block win rate, depending on which side of it, right? So we've been having all these debates, on Twitter, all this analytic stuff, and there's guys that they view football like baseball, and I don't like that. But this tool, this idea of pass block win rate appears to be something that is microchipped in to the shoulder pads. And there's something about if you keep a distance between you and the defender for longer than 2.5 seconds, that's considered a win in a pass block. That's how I understand it. That's how Lester explained it to me. Well, if you're getting pushed back and dumped into the quarterback's lap as a tackle, that's not a win. That is not a win in pass pro. So I think that part of these stats that you're seeing may be a poor reflection of what this stat is trying to do. He may be staying in front of his guy, but that he's getting driven right back into Justin Fields, and that impacts the pass, right? So he has some pieces of his game in the pass pro that are pretty good. That's a really good thing to be wide frame, to be able to get out of your stance quick. It's not so good that you're not anchoring well. So that's something he's going to need to really work on and improve. You'd hope to have seen a little bit more improvement at this point, because he is, into that second year, but that's something to continue to work on. Again, overall, I think that his pass pro is better. I think 3 negatives that I graded as pass pro. One of them, I think he was the one that went downfield so he got a penalty. You got to give a negative on that.
I
Right?
didn't like that play. We were live streaming on Bootleg.
Well, I didn't like the play either, but you got.
And I was like, I wanted the result, but I was like, I know what that is. And I was like, I think I even said on the air, I bet it's Borum, because he is athletic and he can stretch the play. But you got to know, like you said, as a now not rookie offensive tackle, you've got to feel that rope, right? It's like the clock in the back of a quarterback's head. Hey, I've been standing here too long. There's probably a rusher behind me. Like, there's a thing with a tackle. I've been going too long. I don't have a ball carrier behind me yet. I got to hold up. And he didn't hit it. It was a big play in terms of reversing that play.
I've got to play 7:49 in the first quarter left that I have a negative, but I don't have a note. So apologies on that. A little later on in the game, 12:06 in the second quarter, I had to give him a negative because he just goes down. Like, I mean, his man doesn't really make an influence of the play, but he basically gets into his stance. The guy gives him a forearm and he's on his butt. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I got to give you a negative. If you're falling on your butt at the least amount of a push from a defender, I don't know if somebody stepped on it. I couldn't tell if it was something weird. It just looked like he was just not set up in a good base.
It's not an isolated incident.
Okay. I only saw it one time, but I was like,
no,
nope,
I mean, from this game, it may be an isolated incident.
But
from previous games, I sent you one. I sent you all one and I said, hey, for everybody that says Larry Borom's great, take a look at this rep. And he like stumbles out of his stance on Run Pro and basically just falls between two guys. And I'm like, look, he could have got stepped on, but it didn't look like he did. It looked like he just sort of shot out. There was nobody there. And he went, oops, bam. And that was it. Play was over for him. So I've seen it a couple of times where, again, you're like, why did you not keep your feet? And it's not really clear that somebody overpowered him or torqued him off his feet or anything else. It's just like, Huh, you're on the ground again. Okay.
Again, I like Larry Borum. I don't want this to sound like I'm
Oh.
piling on. I am picking out some of the negatives on the pass play just because I think the rest of the pass pro reps looked pretty good, and they were of that variety that I talked about. The other one I'll just mention, he got beat by an inside move. The guy takes a stab outside and then does a swim move back in. And he got beat by it, but Tevin Jenkins is there, as cover, so you didn't probably notice it, because it didn't lead to a pressure. So it was one of those situations where, because of the group that was rushing and how they picked it up in pass pro, it was fine, right? Like, I mean, it didn't impact Justin Fields. But again, that kind of speaks to that he is susceptible to those counter moves, right? I'm focusing on those power counter moves that drive into his chest and kind of back him up, and he doesn't anchor quite well enough. But he is maybe a little susceptible because he gets out quick. And if somebody can kind of fake him to take that next step, he's leaning one way, and then they have a speed move, like a spin move or a swim move in this instance, that can get him back inside. And again, as an offensive lineman, you don't want to create those rushing lanes for a defender, particularly where it's a shorter distance. You would prefer to keep them going on the outside and just take them out of the pocket. So if he has to make sure that he doesn't get too much weight on that right foot and get fooled by that second step in speed, because you've done such a good job of getting out of your stance and getting to that point where you're sorry, I'm doing pass pro in my chair, which is not not ideal, but you get to that point, if you take that other step and you're leaning, and then that guy hits the swim move on you, then you have to be able to recover quickly, or you're going to give up a pressure. He got a little lucky that Jenkins was there to pick it up, but that was another thing I noticed. But overall, like, I think you're actually pretty happy with the pass pro with Larry Borum, and at least in this game. And I think in other games, what I've seen is they actually put a lot more on him. I only saw them chip once with Cole Kmet in this game.
Mhm.
He doesn't get a lot of help,
No.
and so whereas when I watch Braxton Jones, the degree of difficulty in the pass pro was pretty low for Braxton Jones. They roll the pocket away from him. There would be a lot of chip help either from the running back or the tight end. You didn't get that with Larry Borum, right?
Mhm.
So they're actually asking him to do quite a lot in the pass pro. Most teams, that's going to be flipped, right? Most teams, you're going to help your right tackle because he's not as good in pass pro, but he's a really good run blocker. That's not Larry Borum. He's not really that good in the run game. I I kept dinging him in the run game because he's not driving anybody off the ball,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of times, I think traditionally we think of those right tackles as the guys that are going to be road graders. They're going to come off the ball and they're going to move their man off. They're bigger, they're stronger, and that's what they're there for. Is they're going to open up lanes. You're going to have a lot of your run plays on the right side. That is a lot of traditional football. Is that your left side is a little better pass pro, then your right side's better at run blocking. You're going to run a lot behind your right side of your offensive line. Very few runs were to the right side of this offensive line. At least in this game, I would love to see it broken down over the year, because I was like, oh my God, they're running away from him again. They're running away from him again. So now you've got this offense where Braxton Jones is a pretty good run blocker, and they're running behind Braxton Jones, and they were running behind Cody Whitehair when he was in there, and they're passing away. They're like moving the pocket and rolling away from Braxton Jones because they don't quite trust him enough in pass pro, but they do feel pretty good about Larry Borum in pass pro, but they don't like running behind him. So now they're putting a ton of tendencies on tape, right? That's the big picture here, is that because you're starting these guys that have these strengths and weaknesses, now you're kind of showing your hand before you even get off the bus, and that you're probably going to have a lot more of your runs going to the left side, and you're probably going to roll out away from your left tackle who you don't trust quite yet. Um, I mean, every defensive coordinator has figured that out. Like, I'm not revealing anything that these guys don't know. And so that's really the take home message when you scout these guys. It's like, you see what they do pretty well, but you also see where they're weak. And I am just shocked that they're not running behind the right side at least a little bit. This game, it was just like nothing. They barely went behind him. And when they did, they kind of regretted it, because he can't move the guy off the ball, off the point. This man is almost always going to control him. So he's going to have, if you're going to watch the tape, the defender is going to get off the ball, and when he engages with the Borum, he's going to extend and he's going to have control because he's going to have extended out and Borum. And so there's this big space. It's like a middle school dance where they've left enough room for Jesus and a balloon, right? Like that's what it looks like. Is there
Jesus and a balloon?
I don't know. And there's so he's got like he's extended out. The defensive lineman's got his arms extended out. That's what he wants to do because he can then see where the ball's going and he can then like chuck his guy aside and he can make the play. You see that a lot, right? When the play side is relevant for Borum. When it's not, it's just kind of this, well, I'm not play side and I'm just kind of, and where this came into play, most notably to me, was he flows with the play on the big Khalil Herbert run. He doesn't touch a soul. But he runs over to the side of where the ball to the left side. He's kind of jogging over. He's kind of waving to the crowd. He's kind of, and then Herbert cuts back and he takes this like huge gain and Borum still just doesn't do anything. Where I'm sorry, man, that's a negative to me. Like you gotta be looking for somebody to hit because you never know when these plays get extended. Someone that he was next to that he could have put a block on could have made that play on Herbert and he would have had a 6-yard gain instead of a whatever it was, right? Instead of this huge giant game breaking gain. So there's a little bit of lollygagging, a little bit of loafing in the run game. And even if you're backside, I still think you got to try to pick up your guy. It just didn't seem like there was a lot of it. Like you said, he's an athletic guy, but I just wasn't seeing it to the point where I wasn't worried about. If I'm a defender, I'm not worried about Larry Borom in the run game.
No,
that's kind of the basic scouting report right now. Is that he's pretty good in pass pro. You just can't run behind him. I don't know what more there is to say.
Yeah, my problem with that, it was really interesting to listen to you sort of break out strengths and weaknesses based on position, because a lot of times we talk about these guys in a vacuum. And as you well know, offensive line is not a vacuum. It's the opposite, right? It is a unit. It has to work together. And you've talked previously on this show about not wanting to create spaces or allow spaces to be created between you and the guy next to you that the defense can exploit. And one of the issues when you're not looking at these guys in a vacuum, but rather looking at them in concert, is the guy next to Borum can run block his ass off.
Yes.
And so you get in run plays these ready-made gaps for people to shoot, whether it's linebackers or 3-techs or whatever. Tevin fires off the ball, gets a hold of his guy and starts mangling him, pushes him 3 yards deep. Borum stands up and is in the way, and he is engaged. And now you have this space where Tevin is out there and Borum is not, and hungry 3-techs are like, oh, whoosh, I can backside this and make the play because Tevin's pushing his, maybe he's up to the linebacker, or maybe he takes the 1T and the 3T is off to the right of him, gets across the face of the center, and he's got this huge gap now because Tevin's pushing his guy. And if Tevin was matched up with a right tackle that was also pushing his guy, even only a yard, there wouldn't be this space there, but there is, because the center's okay in the run game, not great. So you get this inconsistency. It's like pistons firing at the wrong times, and you get these spaces that they pull into the line and the defense can exploit. And you see that on some of those runs. Now, sometimes it works great. Sometimes it creates this cutback lane for a guy like Khalil Herbert. Sometimes they get snuffed out because, the line has essentially kind of torn itself apart, and it's not showing a unified front here. And the defense knows that that's very likely, I guess, to occur with the right tackle, that wherever he engages his guy is pretty much where he's going to be in the run game. And that's something that they can absolutely game plan around, that they can work around. And like you said, you're not revealing any secrets here. Anybody watching the tape goes, okay, this guy's moving people. This guy can't move. He's basically a post. This guy, he's hit and miss at center, and then left guard's been a revolving door, so we don't exactly know what we're going to get there. And then this guy at left tackle, he can run block like a beast. His pass pro is inconsistent, and here's the ways that you can exploit him right now. So they're going to have that, but whenever the line is performing in very different ways across plays, you're creating opportunities for a defense to screw up the play if the offense doesn't do it itself.
Bill Belichick is going to show you all of the ways that this is not working.
You know who's going to show you? You know who's going to be the big red indicator? Like, you could paint him red for the day, and it would just be like, oh, what are they doing against the run game? You know who's going to do that? Kyle Duggar.
Right.
Kyle Duggar is going to just eat versus the Bears because Kyle Duggar is really, really good around the line of scrimmage, and he's super powerful. He can take on offensive linemen one-on-one, does so regularly in the Patriot scheme, and wins. He's going to have a field day. He's got to be so excited because he's going to have a lot of fun.
I would also, if I was trying to attack this offensive line, you mentioned Jenkins. I would take advantage of that aggressiveness in the pass game because he gets himself out of position in pass pro.
He will overrun. He will overset. Yep.
Yep. So there's a lot to take advantage of here. I was hoping there would be a little bit more gelling. I think that Patrick
we could just cut it off right there. The Bears offensive line. I was hoping there would be more gelling.
I know.
There it is for everybody. Yep.
I just wanted there to be a little bit more stability and
cohesiveness, all that stuff.
Having the thumb with Patrick.
It's created a lot of problems that are troubling to this team, and I think troubling at a base level. And I've said that multiple times over multiple platforms over now multiple weeks, is that you can say whatever you want about what the chip says about pass rush win rate. You can talk about the times that Justin has had a clean pocket and has run himself out of it or made the wrong decision. Yes, those things do exist. Like, they're not, but you can't talk about any of that stuff without talking about the offensive line and its function, or really lack thereof, mostly throughout this season. There have been times when it works. Even in this game, there were times when it worked, but it's not consistent, and you can't tell when it's going to work and when it's not. And if you don't have that trust, this as a former offensive lineman, if you don't have that trust that, hey, I'm going to get this and that guy's going to be there, or that guy's going to win his block, or that guy's going to make that push or open that hole, or give me the 2 seconds I need to throw this flare pass. Like, if you don't know when you get zero protection, you kind of don't have protection ever. And that is the bedrock issue with this offense. And it's not going to get any better until that gets better. Like, it has to start there.
All right. So that's Larry Borom. Again, I like Larry Borom. I don't like just picking out the bad stuff. I'm trying to tell you that there's a lot of stuff that you can like, but there's enough to make me feel like we were probably right in our initial evaluation to say this guy's a really good swing tackle. This guy is prospect. Like, this is a guy that could really benefit from some veteran leadership in front of him. He's playing his butt off, all that stuff. We like him, but again, there's definitely some flaws in his game and some things that he can work on. So we'll leave Borum there, and then after the break, EJ is going to break down Kyler Gordon. All right, EJ. Backyard kid, right? Went to Washington. You saw him, up close and personal in your own backyard. So you were very excited when the Bears took Kyler Gordon. Let's hear you break him down, man.
Yeah, I'm excited for this, not only because of that familiarity and the fact that I did like him pre-draft, and then when the Bears grabbed him, I was excited about that, but also that he's had some really notable stumbles through the early season. He's taken a lot of flack, and that's not surprising for rookie corners, but it's been pretty loud, and some of that comes from Kyler Gordon himself. He's had not great games up to this point. Again, flash plays, but some real inconsistency. And, look, playing corners like playing goalie. When you miss, people score, and, people are going to see that. But I I believe in his ability, and I really wanted to see that start to get unlocked. And I feel like this week was the week that we got to see that. And that's really fun. So I wanted to talk about him not only because I liked him, but also because he struggled and say, hey, what are some of the good things this week provided that? So the overall summary on Gordon: drafted in the second round out of Washington. He was I put 11th overall. That's not right. That's not correct. Anyway, second round. Part of the reason that Gordon gets trouble is because he was picked highly by a team that needed offensive help, and they picked a defender, and that has nothing to do with him. Like, that's not his choice. Like, he plays the position he plays, and they said this is worthwhile. It's one of the reasons that he's received so much scrutiny in the early season. And he's just going to have to deal with that. That's just a thing. He is 5'11 and a half, just about 6 foot, 194. His relative athletic score, 9.69. Very good. Places him 63rd out of 2001 cornerback prospects from 1987 to 2002. So out of a couple of grand quarterbacks, he's 63rd overall in terms of his athletic profile. Excellent, well-rounded athletic profile. Agility and explosion are elite, and we're going to see that through a bunch of these plays, specifically at his size. He had a 6'6", 3-cone, which means his change of direction ability is excellent, and it came into play on the field this week and saved a touchdown in one case. So we're going to see that. It's always cool when you get to see testing translate to the field, and we got to see it really directly. His production for this game, he was the third highest rookie cornerback graded this week. Only Tariq Woolen, who was the defensive player of the week, and Sauce Gardner were higher. Sauce Gardner's, those two guys are in the early running for defensive rookie of the year for sure. So that's an excellent place to be. Really good company. Allowed just 13 yards passing in this game. That's been one of his struggles in previous games, is that he has allowed some big completions, and a bunch of them. Had a couple of TD saving tackles in this game. We're going to talk about those, but there's one that I am absolutely certain would have been a touchdown. There's another one that probably would have been a touchdown. So, and our good buddy Jonathan Wood, always cool when we can bring Jay Wood into the show. He posted this: after giving up 2.9 yards per coverage snap in the first month of the season, which is pretty high, Kyler Gordon has only given up 1 yard per coverage snap in the last 2 weeks. So props to him for turning it around. Hopefully it's a trend that can continue. That's what Jonathan Wood said about him. And I feel the same way. I feel like we're starting to see the light come on. That stat indicates, hey, it was 3 yards a snap per coverage snap, and now it's 1. Okay, that's going in the right direction. And that's, I think, more representative of his ability as a player. So, all right, as always.
Helps to play Carson Wentz.
It does help to play Carson Wentz. However, I think it helps to play Carson Wentz even more in the slot, because the Commanders don't run a lot deep from the slot. There is one notable exception in here. They tend to run their deeper routes on the outside, where Carson Wentz will take shots and he will hit them. Like, that's the ball that Carson Wentz can still hit. We were talking about this on the live stream, is that what he doesn't hit is the underneath stuff, the timing stuff, the stuff that you've considered like gimmies for a quarterback. He's all over the place on that stuff. But all of a sudden, like, Zeus's Thunderbolt out of the blue, 25 yards, pinpoint accuracy in the cover 2 hole downfield. Like, he can hit that ball. So he's a weird quarterback to play, I think, as a defender, but he's got that ability. So first quarter, gonna skip ahead. Interestingly, in the first quarter, they played him exclusively in the slot. This has been a back and forth game with the Bears all year. They have given him both nickel or slot responsibilities, and then played him at outside corner as well. And I think that's a heavy load. We've talked about that on this show previously. Interestingly, in this game, they played him exclusively in the slot for the first quarter. And whenever they went to base, 4-3 base, they played Kindle Vilder as the outside corner, which was really interesting. And I'm not sure why that is, but it was a fact for the first quarter. And then second quarter started to get back to that pattern where if they were in nickel, he would play slot. And when they would go to a 2 cornerback setup, he would slide to the outside, which was more what we've seen for the rest of the season. Just an interesting little sort of first quarter. Don't know if it was getting his legs under him or they thought Kindle Vilder was going to tackle better on the outside. I'm not sure which, but he plays well against the run, which is interesting. And it's one of the things that endeared him to me pre-draft. It's guys that don't tackle, guys that won't set the edge, guys that won't do the dirty work as a corner. I just don't want him on the Bears. Like I believe the Bears defense, no matter whether it's Lovey's defense or, was Desai's defense or now it's Alan Williams' defense. Like you need to have corners who can at least force runners back inside, corners who get on blocks and don't get off. I don't really have any use for them. I don't care how good they are against the pass. You got to support that piece, or else offenses get big free gains on the outside. 45 seconds left in the first quarter. He lines up in the nickel. He gets outside his block, tackle on the edge run. Like he is good enough to do that. He's good enough to pressure, especially a wide receiver lined up against him. We'll talk about tight ends in a little bit, but get off that block and limit those gains. He did a great job of that. He did that over and over again in this particular game. I'm going to skip ahead to the second quarter because this is where it starts to get really fun. 9:16 left in the second quarter. He undercuts a running back flare route, and this is a beautiful, gorgeous play. Lined up in the slot over the tight end, so he almost looks like a linebacker in this alignment. He's lined up right next to Roquan Amaro, very tight, right up over the tight end. He shifts right because they go a lot of pre-snap motion in the commander's office. You saw this, both pre-snap and during snap motion during the snap. They use that on almost every play. So wide receiver motion tries to pull him and he's like steps to the inside, but he doesn't go, hey, I'm going to go with that, which is what the offense wants him to do. So he has responsibility for the running back. Running back flares out to the right in the flat. Kyler accelerates because, again, he kept his base position. He's got that change of direction, that acceleration. Beautifully undercuts the route, knocks it away with his right hand. This is a textbook play. Like if you could roll up to any, high school, college and say, hey, teach tape for taking on a running back flare from an inside alignment. Like here it is. This is what you need to do. Just a great, great play. Very next play, Commanders try and run roughly the same route, but they do it with the tight end, Cole Turner. They do it from a different alignment, but it ends up being the same route. Little flare out into the right flat. He's again lined up over the tight end. This time the tight end runs a route. He goes with him. This is one of Gordon's real strengths is he's got the versatility to cover a back, to cover a tight end, to cover Curtis Samuel out of the slot, which he did all game. Players like that aren't that common in the NFL. Corners with size who can take on a guy that's 245 like Cole Turner, who can take on a guy that's 185 and runs a 4.4 like Curtis Samuel, or who can take on Brian Robinson, who's like all of 6'2" and 228 pounds and win against all three of them. That's why the Bears drafted Kyler Gordon, is because they really don't have to switch out for multiple offensive sets. Yeah, if you're going to line up in ultra heavy, you're probably going to pull him and put a linebacker in. But other than that, he can stay on the field. He can play nickel. He can play dime. He can be the dime backer, play around the line of scrimmage. You can play him out wide. He's a very, very versatile player, which is super cool. Very next play, Cole Turner, who's a tight end I liked out of Nevada, runs the flat route. Gordon is quick to close the distance. He's not there to bat the throwaway. What he does is wrap Cole Turner's waist and just throw himself to the inside and pull him down. And you might say, oh, it's not, that's a really good tackle because he gives up 6 inches and 45 pounds to Cole Turner.
Yeah.
And Turner got about 1 yard on this play. No yards after the catch. No run after the catch. Like it was a flat throw. And if he breaks that tackle, he's picking up 6 or 7 before he gets hit by the next corner or the safety coming over. Instead, he gets literally 1 yard. It's basically a zeroed out play for the offense. So with those 2 plays in a row, batting throwaway on first down, tackling the tight end for 1 yard on second down, he pretty much kills the series all by himself. Like now they're in 3rd and long. They're behind the sticks. Defense can relax a little bit, basically let catches happen in front of them and play forward. Great, great job by Kyler Gordon really early in the game. Second quarter, 1:56 left. This is the phantom PI call. And I want to bring this up because this is a bummer. Sometimes it's going to happen. I wanted to break it down. It's actually a great play by Gordon. Shouldn't have been a flag, period. End of story. But we'll talk about why. So the Commanders show trips to the field. We've talked about this before. Trips is 3 wide receivers. The field side is you're on the hash. closest to the boundary, that's boundary side. The open or wide side of the field is the field side. So trips to the field, 3 wide receivers out to the wide side of the field. Gordon takes the innermost wide receiver who's lined up in the tight slot, just outside the offensive tackle. He plays press off the line. He gets his hand on. He matches phase beautifully and drops into what's called trail technique, which is basically running behind the receiver, between the receiver and the quarterback. This is a plan. This is not he got beat to be there. And he's doing it on a bit of a tightrope because the offense is running a 7 route, which is a corner route. So I believe it's Curtis Samuel. Yep, it is Curtis Samuel. Goes up, and he's basically breaking to the boundary. And Gordon's playing underneath him, and he doesn't really have over-the-top help to the outside. If it was to the middle, there would be a safety there, but he's on his own. This is a one-on-one coverage pretty much at the break. He's there beautifully. He's right there. He has his head around, and he makes contact with the ball first. Like, there is some contact between wide receiver and defensive back here, but Gordon has every right to that ball, and he basically runs the route better than Samuel does. And the refs get sad about it, and they throw a flag. That's the end-all be-all. Is he's in position to, quite frankly, make the catch. Samuel's behind him trying to reach up and over. There's no reason Gordon hasn't pushed him to get there. He's not tripping him. He's not holding his jersey. Like, his arm is engaged, but he is back around trying actually to turn this shoulder. And if Samuel had let him turn that shoulder, he would have had both hands and caught that ball because he was in perfect position. Refs throw a flag. It ends up being defensive pass interference. This is a great play by Kyler Gordon. It is perfect. He runs the route better than receiver. Should have been a pick. Instead, he gets a flag. It happens sometimes, especially these days in the NFL. Don't get down on Kyler Gordon about this play. This is a very, very good play by a defensive back.
I know we're talking about Gordon, but Jalen Johnson had a defensive pass interference as well that looked like absolute total BS.
Perfection.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I for those of you at home, I yelled at the line judge for you. He was very close, he's obviously on the line, so he's 15 yards away. And I yelled, "What the hell are you looking at? Yeah. What did you possibly see there?" So I don't know. I feel like he heard me. I was close enough.
I feel like he heard me.
Yeah, I was close enough. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
That's great. No, it's great. I want to talk about a play where Kyler Gordon wasn't super involved that folks saw and maybe breathed a sigh of relief, because I looked at it and then I looked at it again, and I was pretty sure what the offense was doing. I was pretty sure what the defense was doing, but I phoned a lifeline. I DM'd Brett and I said, "Hey, Brett, do you have a second? Like, you're better at diagramming coverages than I am. I want you to look at this coverage and tell me if what I think I'm seeing is what I'm seeing, because if that's the case, it's really interesting." And so he hopped on a call with me for a second. He's like, "Nope, you saw it the right way." And I was like, "Okay, it's really interesting. This is quarter 2, 141 left. Bears start off in cover 3, which looks like cover 1 or man with a linebacker in a hook zone. So they basically started man, and they rotate really quickly to a Bears classic staple, cover 2. Everybody that watched the Bears and Brian Urlacher's era with Lovie Smith is really familiar with cover 2. Safety split wide in the back, and the crux move of cover 2 is that the middle linebacker has to carry the seam route. He drops into that deep middle zone. That's cover 2 in a nutshell. Safety split wide in zone. Look for, corners play short, and there's a little hole between that everybody knows about. It's called the hole shot hole, or the cover 2 hole, in between the corner and the safety on the sides. And then the linebacker's got to carry that seam ball. That's how it works. If it doesn't work, it breaks.
Brian Urlacher, obviously very famous in that defense because he was very good at carrying that seam route.
And strangely enough, the Bears have a converted safety who now plays linebacker, Nicholas Morrow, whose responsibility it was, once they rotated to cover 2, to cover the seam route, which is the one that looks like right by Kyler Gordon. So if you're looking at this play in real time, you might have gone, "Oh, Kyler let his guy go." No, Kyler's responsible for the short hook zone or the stick zone at about 15 yards, and it's Morrow's job. And Morrow kind of doesn't accelerate for the first 3 steps. He gets sort of over to the lane, but he sort of, I don't want to say he loafs. He just runs at not top speed, which if you got Curtis Samuel coming up the seam, you got to turn and run. That's teach technique for cover 2 as a middle linebacker. If you got that guy going, you turn and run. And he doesn't do it right away. So he ends up in trail technique, but not the good kind. The I'm trailing technique because the guy ran by me. And the cool thing about this play is the defense played it pretty well correctly, with the exception of Morrow not sort of turning and sprinting. The rest of the defensive backs are in good position for cover 2. And at one point in the play, all 5 receivers for Washington are open. And it's just something that happens in football sometimes, and everybody thinks there must be a perfect solution for either the offense or the defense on every play. And the answer is sometimes there isn't. You call a good defense, offense calls a good offensive play against it, and like they both execute. And this is one of those times. So they run an old Bruce Arians staple called 9-8-9, which looks a little bit like 3 verts. The 2 wide receivers on the outside go vert. Middle receiver, which is Curtis Samuel, the guy we're talking about with Morrow, has basically a middle read. And if he gets inside leverage, he runs it straight up the hash so that he keeps his leverage. If he gets somebody with outside leverage taking him, he runs like a skinny post. He bends it off towards the middle. And throughout this, like, again, Bears drop into cover 2. The guy going up the left boundary is open in the cover 2 hole first, and Wentz can hit that shot. The guy going up the right boundary could have been when he released it an equally fine throw, because the receiver is passing the defensive back just as that occurs. So it probably would have been a play at the goal line. Eddie was the deep safety on that side. He would have had to make a pretty tough turn with Wentz's ability to hit that corner. So that route was open. And the throw, and it's the correct one, Wentz takes is the middle. Curtis Samuel gets by Morrow, and it's basically man coverage splitting the safeties. That's the throw you take, because it's 6 if he hits it. And he misses him by about 3 inches.
I don't even know, man. I think it was a drop, because that was right in front of me.
It hit his hand. It hit his hands. He's leaping. It would have been a tough catch. Wentz makes it good. The Bears dodged a bullet here. It was a well defense. Morrow was a couple steps late to Samuel. The rest of the defensive backs are in great position, but honestly, Wentz could have gone left early to the cover 2 hole. He could have thrown middle or right. Both of those probably would have been like goal line plays, touchdowns, bang, bang. And then both guys come open on the little flare flats, which Cole Turner runs a basically chip leak. He hits it and just goes out. And both those guys are wide open. They're not going anywhere. But at one point, all 5 Washington wide receivers are open, and the defense was called correctly and played almost correctly without Morrow's quick step. So it's just one of those fascinating plays where it's like, it looks like, oh man, he just ran. And Wentz missed it by a hair because he can hit that throw, and the Bears dodged a bullet on that one. So fascinating little game within a game, pre-snap rotation, how'd the coverage work, how'd the offense run against it, and missed it by that much. So quarter 3, I'm going to skip to wide run contain. Again, Gordon's really good at this. Commanders run a fake to the left, and then they sweep wide right with a wide receiver. Gordon sees this and goes, oh shit. Like, I got to get out there. Like, all I got to do is get out there, because I got to turn the guy back inside. And he does that. He gets off his block and he gets to the outside and basically flashes his jersey and goes, boo, you can't go this way. Right? You're going to have to run a bubble around me, and that's not going to work. So he cuts in, the running back cuts inside. They get like a 5-yard gain, but he basically forced him back in to all the defenders. He did his job, and he's willing to do that kind of dirty work. And he has the both recognition and that quick acceleration to go, I got to be outside on this. Like, I don't need to stop him. I know what I need to do. I got to be over there. That's great recognition. Ends up a modest gain for the offense. He did his job. We talked about defensive backs that can't get off blocks. Quarter 3, 3:31. This starts a really dominant run of Kyler Gordon against the run in about a 3-minute period at the end of the third quarter. He makes play after play, and all of them are pretty big. So 3:31, it starts with a spinning run stop. Commanders use motion to identify coverage. Again, talked about this. They do this all the time. Gordon follows from the offense's right to left. He's got slot coverage on Cam Sims. Commanders run from the shotgun. It's basically an off-tackle left run right through Gordon's gap. They basically brought him over there with motion from Sims, using Cam Sims, who is a huge wide receiver. And they think, okay, we've got an advantage. We've got our huge wide receiver on their defensive back. We're going to run off tackle to his side. Sims is going to isolate Gordon. we're going to get a gain here. That's what the offense is thinking. Pretty good job, except for Kyler Gordon spins back inside off Sims' block in perfect time to make the tackle in that gap. Morrow, who was the linebacker on that side, got ridden out by Charles Leno. Good old Charles Leno. Basically took Morrow's momentum and shoved him to the outside. So the running back's got a free shot at that point. Gordon spins off Sims' block. He's right there, takes his legs. Really good stop. Very textbook play. If he was one of those corners that couldn't get off the block, that play probably goes for a lot more, like 12 to 15 more. It wouldn't have been a few yards. Next play, 255. This is a touchdown saver. In my opinion, this is a touchdown saver. So Gordon's in the slot to the offensive left. Washington runs this basically everything right look. They take the tight end on that side and they hook him across. They're trying to drag everybody to the right. The play action is to the right. The running backs go to the right. Everybody goes to the right, except they're leaking out to the screen for a left. Gordon could have followed all that action, but he actually just kind of hangs out in space and he looks a little unsure of it for just a second. He's like, man, should I go? And then he realizes if I go, like, there's nobody over here. Like, it's an entire third of the field with no defenders. So he just he starts moving to the middle, but he doesn't go very far. And then he sees it. He sees it the snap. He sees basically a little play action fake and the pirouette, which is going to turn into the screen throw. And at that point, he's backpedaling and he triggers. And his trigger from backpedal to going is fast enough that he runs directly under Charles Leno's block. There are 3 offensive linemen and Brian Robinson and Kyler Gordon. That's the setup for the play. If any one of them gets a hand on him, they all outweigh him by 100 pounds. It's over. Brian Robinson literally walks into the end zone. And Kyler Gordon triggers, gets under Leno's block to the outside, and then, because he kind of had to loop to get around Leno, just stops and 90 degrees shoots into Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson takes a big hit. He spins, it slows him down enough, and Morrow hits him right after that. If Gordon doesn't make that play, that is a pure touchdown. I've got a still shot that I sent to JB in the agenda, which is from the sky cam behind. And all you can see is 3 300-pound guys, Brian Robinson and Kyler Gordon, standing in front of that little phalanx. Made the play. Touchdown saver, period. Super duper impressive play. Then Washington runs this play that they run 3 times throughout the game. They ran it once in the first quarter. This is a tiny little pet peeve, minuscule pet peeve. They run this whip motion, which means they start the motion to one side, they get them over there, and then they run them back, and then they run through where they vacated in the middle. And they ran it in the first quarter, and I don't expect him to stop it. Maybe he picks it up on film. Maybe they haven't run it before. I don't know enough about the Commanders' offense to say that's a tendency, but they did run this exact play in the first quarter. They run it again in the third quarter, and they get him again. Like, Gordon has to follow that guy, but again, he follows him sort of to the letter, and they get a gain. And the Bears stop him. The other side of the defense works, so it's not a huge deal, but I'm like, Kyler, at very least, you should have been calling this out. You should have been like, in the hole. Like, they're coming back. I've seen this before. That's a lot to ask from a rookie defensive back. I get it, which is why this is a minuscule pet peeve. Comes into play again at the end of the game. So this is what we call foreshadowing. Third quarter, again, we're still in the third quarter. Last couple of minutes, he makes dominant play after dominant play. 47 seconds left. I'm calling this one Panic at the Disco. Ball's on the Chicago 10. Tight set. Washington again runs motion right to left at the snap. This is a theme. Kyler follows the motion man, and it ends up being Curtis Samuel, and he gets a tap pass. Quick hike. Wentz gives him a little tap pass. He gets out. Again, other folks have set the edge. He has to cut back. Kyler's waiting for him, makes the play. They get a few yards, but they don't get a touchdown. Really solid play. The reason, the panic part is, as he was leaving that left edge of the defense, there was a little bit of, who goes with him and Vilder? And I think Kyler's right. I think he, as a slot defender, basically says to Vilder, like, you're the outside guy. But Vilder doesn't know that. So they both start to go, which would have left the tight end on that side wide open. But you can see Kyler like, no, I got it. And he keeps running and goes over and makes a tackle. So I think, again, this sort of lends to credibility that Kyler knows where he's supposed to be, knows his responsibility. And he's like, no, that's my guy. I'm going with him. Makes the tackle. Would have been a touchdown again. And then next play, 31 seconds. This is the QB run stop. Ball's on the Chicago 7 after that run. Another tight set, more pre-snap motion. Gordon gets wise this time, and he lays off the motion. He's like, they've been pulling me out of position all night long. I'm going to sort of soft play my trail on this. I'm going to not go as far as they want me to. And it's a really good thing, too, because Wentz rolls out with a lead blocker who is Cole Turner, and Cole Turner takes out the linebacker. So it's Wentz on Gordon. And Wentz is a big guy. He can run. Gordon makes a stop. Like, again, second play in a row, he's basically stopped a touchdown. It's a 1-yard gain. Quick trigger, good tackle. So that whole 3-minute, that all happened within 3 minutes at the end of the third quarter. That's Kyler Gordon just sort of dominating from the cornerback position, which is not something you see very often. That is a good, smart, physical football player making a bunch of plays that would have put the Bears in the hole. I don't think casual fans see all that. I certainly didn't see it all, even though we were live streaming the game, because you're concentrating on other things. You're not sure who's making the tackle every time. Going back, he took over the game for a 3-minute section and made every play he needed to make. That's just really impressive for a rookie corner.
I mean, it's an impressive for any player, right? I mean, to be able to take over a game like that, and given the, let's just call it a rocky start to his career, to his season. It's great to see that. Actually, there was a little bit of sense that man, Gordon's playing pretty well.
Yeah.
When we were in the stands, there's enough of that where you're like, man, he's playing pretty well.
They called him again. That's his number.
Right.
Okay, cool. Cause he's 6 and Brisker's 9 and Eddie's 4 and there's a lot of single digits running around back there. They're all roughly the same size. Vilder's a little bit shorter squatter. He has a double-digit number, so you can kind of see him when he's in there. But you can pretty easily, even on tape, I had to go back a couple times. Okay, is that Brisker? Oh, and that's pretty cool. In the fourth quarter, he takes on Leno in the run game. He knows he's lined up tight again in the slot, and here comes Charles Leno. He's like, "This is a run," and he gets into Charles Leno and he moves him 2 yards. He knows he's not going to make the tackle, but he basically has to set the edge by pushing Charles Leno out so somebody else can. And not a lot of corners in the NFL will do that. And Gordon fires right into Leno's chest, pushes him 2 yards. Again, doesn't make the tackle. It's not his job to. He basically has to stuff that end of the lineup. Brian Robinson goes, "Oh, crap, that's collapsing," and just goes back into the pursuit. That's all he has to do. But again, he gives up 100 pounds to Leno. More
than
and
that. Yeah.
You don't see corners do that. And right after the muff punt, this is a quick change situation. Muff punt, we could talk about later. We will. Again, he gets a solo run stop that saves the TD. Ball's on the Chicago 6. Washington tries a middle run that gets stuffed. Brian Robinson pops out. And this is the one where Carson Wentz throws a block on Roquan. So Carson Wentz rolls with him. It's Robinson and Wentz. It's Roquan and Gordon. Wentz levels Roquan, which is interesting enough. So it's 1-on-1, Brian Robinson and Kyler Gordon. And Robinson outweighs Gordon by 34 pounds. He's a big dude. He's 6'2", 228. And Gordon gets him down. He doesn't score. This is the kind of impact. A lot of people are like, oh, he didn't have a lot of great pass coverage. And after the first half, he didn't. They didn't throw at him a lot. His coverage was good in the few coverage reps he had, but he was dominant in the run game. He was smart. He was physical. He saved touchdowns in this game. So just a great, great game by Kyler Gordon. And my last little foreshadowing bit, fourth quarter, Washington's trying to run the clock out. This has nothing to do with Kyler Gordon. 2:16 left in the fourth. Guess what they run? That stupid little whip run play, right? Backwards, forwards, backwards again. And Robinson almost breaks it for a score. He stepped out of a tackle if he was hadn't gotten shot a couple of months ago and was just a little bit faster.
What a crazy story, by the way.
He might go 60 yards for a touchdown to completely seal this game. And I'm like, that's the third time they've run that play and it almost worked. They almost got it over on you. And at that point, you got to have folks on defense who are identified. It is a young defense, but you got to have folks going, oh, whip motion. Hey, they're coming off the weak corner right here. Just don't leave. Just sit right there. And even if they do something else, that's fine. We pushed them away from their their lead
Right.
hand.
Make them run the counter off of this.
Yeah, whatever. But I was like, I got to the end and I was like, I ran it again, and he was a hair's breadth from going 60 yards for a touchdown, which would have been like more demoralizing. The end of this game was pretty demoralizing anyway.
It was
but
pretty demoralizing.
overall impact for Kyler Gordon, not a ton of coverage snaps later on, like we talked about. Looked very solid in the ones he had. Was quick, decisive, and extremely tough throughout this game. Played a very physical game. Saved at least 2 scores from happening in the run game, maybe 3, depending on how you look at the replay. It's starting to click for him like I thought it would pre-draft, and I'm excited to see his future unfold with the Bears, because you saw the sort of full range, the full gamut of what he can do for a defense, and I just think the arrow's pointing way, way up for Kyler Gordon.
Yeah, I think that they put a lot on him early, and
They did.
I think it's super common for corners to struggle as rookies anyway. So you add that in, you add a lot of moving pieces, you add Jalen Johnson getting hurt early, missing a couple games, so you had even more moving pieces. So I mean, I don't think it's surprising that Gordon struggled early, and he was targeted, and you could tell it was getting to him, right? Like, I mean, he had a couple rough first games, but uh, this is why he was the first pick of this administration. Is that this regime is that he's a talented football player. He's a super great athlete, and you can see it starting to click. And like you say, sometimes it's just more in the run game, but that's great. Like, they needed it. The Bears needed him to make those plays, and he did. If he's not making those plays, this game actually might have got out of hand.
Yeah, and you saw him make plays again against Brian Robinson. That deflection was textbook. You saw him make plays against Cole Turner. You saw him make plays against Carson Wentz, a big running quarterback. You saw him make plays against Curtis Samuel and Cam Sims in the pass game. You made plays against all those guys. That's a very wide range of athletes in the NFL with lots of different skill sets and things to be leveraged against you as a defender. And he basically snuffed all of them at one time or another in this game, some of them multiple times. That's super encouraging. It's not like, oh, well, if this one guy comes out, we want you on him. It's like, hey, stay out there and you can take any one of these 3 guys, and we feel pretty good about it.
Well, I would assume that your sort of final judgment on this game was good game, but also we'll look at Gordon again down the line. But I mean, the arrow's pointing up. Like, this is a player that we think is going to be pretty good.
And it's 2 in a row.
Yeah.
He had multiple games where there were multiple struggles again. Sometimes he was good against the run and not great against the pass. Other times he had really good pass reps and then really bad pass reps, almost back to back. And that's just that up and down adjustment that you talked about. They were running him at 2 positions, one of the hardest positions to learn as a rookie is nickel. And I think he was finding his footing, quite frankly, in inside the team, inside the defense, inside the league, all those things. And now 2 weeks in a row, we're starting to see, you would call this normalization to a mean if you were looking at data, right? We're getting closer to what we thought was what we were getting. And I think that's the case is some people say it's slowing down. He's definitely mentally sharp. You could see multiple times in this game where he was like, I know what's going to happen here. In the early games, he was just kind of running around like, where am I supposed to be? And okay, I'm supposed to be here. But then a team like this is a stressful team to play considering their offensive design. They use a ton of pre-snap motion and a ton of during snap motion. And the whole point of that is to take a defensive back like Gordon and get you out of whatever leverage you had, right? It's not only to move you from one side to another, but if you're lined up like inside and they're trying to run a slant, they want you to be somewhere besides inside. So they move you around and then you don't get set that way and it gives them an advantage. So there's a lot to be processing dynamically here. And he handled all of it.
Well, good stuff. I appreciate that. I thought it was a really good choice by you to take Gordon here because it did seem like he had a pretty good game, and I'm happy that you were able to take the time to review that. Great notes. There's even more stuff that I got to see that the rest of you didn't. But maybe one of these days we'll share that with you. But we've already had.
I actually had a thought today. I'll run it by you in live time, which is always dangerous. We should just post that for the Patreon folks.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
we'll just super easy to do. We just save it as a PDF and we just post it. And if you're a Patreon member, you get to see the full notes, because that's like JB said, I skipped the whole first quarter and there's notes for the first quarter. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, let us know.
I think we post the notes on Patreon. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do that. Well, let's talk about our drinks before we get out of here. I mean, I don't really need to review an Irish coffee. EJ has done the Irish coffee on the show many, many times. But I will say, I mean, first of all, Redbreast is a good Irish whiskey.
I was this close to. Have you had the LaSalle?
No.
Okay, so Redbreast LaSalle is distilled in a different way. It's one up from that.
Okay.
In their lineup, and there's a bottle of it sitting at Coleman's house because I made him buy it when I was down there a few times ago. So when I go down, I always have some. But I was at the store last night and I saw it and I was like, it's not that much. It's like it's an expensive bottle, but it's like $65. It's not like a crazy expensive bottle.
Yeah, that's not very expensive to me, but
no,
anymore.
Not. No, I mean, if you're talking about your average bottle of
especially with her Irish. Yeah,
I mean, like Black Barrel, which is my favorite Jameson, one I picked up last night. Little bottle or regular bottle was 38, big bottle was like 52 or 56. And Redbreast LaSalle is another step above that. It's another 20-25 bucks up after tax, but it's gorgeous. It's really good.
All I'll say is the Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream it's starting to show up on the shelves a little bit more frequently. This used to be super tough to find.
Yeah.
It's a better replacement to Bailey's in my opinion. Just because
I'm excited by that, like for multiple reasons, not just for Irish coffees. I saw that and I was like, because we have some Baileys around, but like that to me sounds delightful.
And I like Baileys. I'm not a Baileys killer, but this is
you said the same thing about Borum.
I like Borum.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I like Borum. I like Baileys, but
that's right. All the bees, Bears, Borum, and Baileys,
head above. So if you see it on the shelf and you're like, I don't know, get it.
That looks delicious. I think I'm gonna have to put it on my list because it will be popular for holiday drinks around here, I'm sure.
Your beer?
Delightful. Browns can be a really wide range from like super sweet and malty and almost too sticky for the palate to the smokier side, a little bit thinner, almost an ale kind of quality to them. This one has a little bit of that off the lead. Like there's a deeper kind of character. It's not quite smoky. It's still on the sweeter side, but again, not being super heavy on the alcohol, not even 6%. Like it's pretty drinkable, and it definitely balances any of that sort of, less sweet start out with a little bit of malt on the back end. But it's great. It's really well balanced. I love it. It's easy to drink. It's delicious. I haven't had it in a long time. So it just off the first sip, I was like, I remember why I like this stuff. This is it's well put together. It's a lot of fun. And I love Browns, one of my all-time favorite styles, and one you don't see that often anymore. So super lucky to be able to have two of them today.
Awesome. Projects. I'm going to actually pitch something that's very different to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I'm I was a clean water professional for 13 years, ran a Clean Water Act program for the state of Iowa. I no longer do that. I'm, out of my own. I'm doing different things, but I do have a contract to develop a clean water podcast for the EPA. And so the first episode dropped. It would be one episode a month. For about 8 episodes this season, and the contract's for 5 years. So I've got this nice little podcast that we're doing. I'm very excited about the first episode. The 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act was yesterday. We were able to get that out yesterday to coincide with that. Fun little episode, just a big overview of what the Clean Water Act is and does, and has the potential to do. Interviewed a couple people that were very meaningful in my career, and so check that out. It's called the Clean Water Pod. If you're on my Twitter, I have a post about it. Clean Water Pod I have a Twitter account for it too. There's like 4 followers.
Ooh,
so
fancy.
If you want to be early, there is that, and we will be getting it onto all of this, the iTunes and Podcast Addict, and I think it's on a couple and a couple that's not yet. It just takes time for it to pick all that stuff up, but would be honored if you would consider subscribing to it, or at least checking out the first episode, seeing if you like it. Very different than football, but I think everybody has at least some identity with wanting clean water. So might be something that interests you folks. Appreciate it if you consider checking it out. What do you got going on?
I do not have a clean water pod, and now I feel insufficient. No, I love that you're doing it. I had no idea it was for 5 years. That's really cool. That's something you're going to be able to get to develop as you go on with it, which will be really, really fun. Thursday Night Football live stream as usual over on the Bootleg YouTube channel. We will kick off 30 minutes before kickoff. Cardinals Saints this week has the potential to be chaotic, not necessarily great.
Sure.
That's the best we're going to pitch this week is chaotic, not great. Join us for special offers from Prize Picks and to see our Prize Picks slip before the game. We always fill one out both before the game and at halftime in case we're losing terribly. But Coleman's on a pretty good streak. He has not lost one yet. So if you get 3 out of 5 right, they will match your slip so you don't lose any money. If you get 4 out of 5, they'll pay you at a lower rate. If you get 5 out of 5, it's up to a 10 times payout on your initial deal. So pretty darn cool with Prize Picks. Really happy they're supporting us this year, but that's the first thing. And then Bootleg Pod comes out every week. This week, drum roll, please, we hit a Tuesday release date for the first time since, I think maybe week 1. That was a Herculean effort. It was a big pod, but we want to get it out a little bit earlier to everybody. So that was a moment of celebration, and then followed by a nap because it was lots of late nights and early mornings.
Well, good stuff. We'll be tuning into that. I'm excited for DeAndre Hopkins to come back to football because, my fantasy team would like to have his services.
My fantasy team.
It's actually not to spoil my article coming out tomorrow on how to bet the Thursday night football game, but I do mention that Kyler is excited about getting DeAndre Hopkins back, as I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury is, and then me. And I don't know which of the 3 of us has more at stake. That's open to interpretation, but it's one of the 3 of us.
You're either number 1 or number 2, because Cliff's money is guaranteed.
Well, ain't that the truth, right? Yeah, that money spends whatever way you go. But I appreciate it. We'll stick around here for a few questions before we get out of here for the night for the YouTube crowd. But for those of you that are listening, really appreciate it. Until next time, bear down.
I wanted to get to Evan's question. What separates Gordon from Jalen? That's a great question. Jalen's just better at everything at this point. He is maybe slightly less quick, but he is faster. He is bigger. He is as strong or stronger. We talked about how tough Kyler played. Jalen is every bit of that. And he is alpha boundary. Now, does he move with big wide receivers to the slot? He does. He's capable there, but he is a pure number 1. I think Gordon could be a number 1, but he really feels like a number 2 that would be masquerading as a number 1. I think he's got the skills to do that, but Jalen is the guy you put on anybody. Like, as long as he's healthy, he's the eraser, right? Whoever you put Jalen on is going to have a shit game, and it. That is a huge asset to a defense. It allows you to play defense like what they call QQH or quarter half, right? Because quarter half means you have to have one guy in man, and Jalen's that guy. He's like, Justin Jefferson, that's your one guy. We're going to array everybody else to deal with the other range of threats. We're just not going to deal with that because you're dealing with that. And it's rare to have a guy like that. And Jalen is up to and above that task. Like, he's all that in a bag of chips. Gordon is hoping to be there one day. That's the difference. And a little bit of size. Like, Jalen's bigger than Kyler by a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they drafted Gordon, the thought was like, holy crap, like they could have, if they want to commit to this duo, they could have a legitimate secondary here. And you got Brisker and, Eddie resurgence, all that. We were like, oh, maybe. And it kind of is happening. Like, it's the only thing in the team that's kind of working right now. Right.
And honestly,
it wasn't at first, and Jalen was hurt, and Gordon was,
and
now
that's
it's like, it's starting to click.
that's the Achilles heel with Jalen Johnson is
Sure.
it's the Achilles shoulder, quite frankly, is
Right.
his shoulder issue since college. They were comfortable with them. They've cropped up a couple of times. The Bears have largely gotten lucky with Jalen's health. He's been pretty available, considering that. But like, yeah, the secondary, this was what we said post draft is like, this secondary is going to be better, period. Like, there is no way that you draft Gordon and Brisker and the secondary doesn't get better. And how many times, and even in this tape, how many times have you looked at the tape and been so happy that Gibson wasn't playing safety?
Sure.
Like,
Right.
because Brisker's out there, he's on the blitz, he's making plays, he's making stops, he's making a couple of mistakes, he's out there on coverage, he's whacking receivers on crossing routes. Like, Brisker is an asset on defense. He's a movable piece that you can, again, put in different situations, cover different players, bring him forward, send him to the back, and he's going to bring you value. Whereas Gibson was more like Borum's run blocking. He would be there, he'd be in the right spot, he would probably make the tackle if the guy ran by him, but he was never going to like, oh my God, Gibson made a play. Like, how many plays has Brisker made in the first 6 weeks? Like, a lot.
Yeah, he pops.
Like, a good handful of plays, and you never got that from Gibson. Plus, there was the question of like, yes, Vilder plays a lot better in this system. He does, as an outside corner, and that's allowed them to play Gordon at the slot. But that again just makes everybody better, even with that 5 on the field, right? If you told me that, Kendall Vilder was going to be one of the best 5 of the Bears defensive backfield when they went to 5 defensive backs, I would have been like, I don't know. But in this Indianapolis, Eberflus, Allen Williams system, he is clearly a better player. Like, he has elevated his play and he fits the role they're asking him to play much better. And that again is like greater than the sum of the parts. You really start to look at the secondary and go, yeah, okay, like this works, this flies. There's not really a weakness in there.
I mean, again, we were looking for some silver lining. That this secondary could be pretty fun.
Yeah.
J2K, appreciate that. I'm excited. It's a nerdy thing. Like, I get it. Like, this is what I did for a living, and maybe niche audience, but that niche actually might be kind of big because it's across the whole country. It's just a matter of having a better understanding of what people like me and others did to help set the stage for restoration projects and protection projects, and water quality throughout the country. And I'm going to try to make it interesting, and try to make it understandable. That's the hard part because you're dealing with not only scientists, but bureaucrats as well. So there's that policy meets science piece where you lose people easily. And so the key is to try to bring people back. But yeah, I think we all kind of have some level of interest in environmental stuff. So hopefully we find an audience that and reach some people. So Senator Blutarski.
Oh, excellent.
Saw an analysis of Borum. Drop step can be too high, jerky, and has a tendency to get his feet too far in front of butt. Fixed. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a technique expert or anything like that, especially since there's so many different variations of offensive line techniques. You don't exactly know what they're being taught or maybe what's best for their body type or whatever. It's more, how are they reacting and, are they getting out over themselves? So I can't break it down to this level. I mean, maybe Lester might be able to, but this isn't like I get a good sense of what's happening and punch and, how they're dealing with counters and things like that. But you get into this level, this like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like there's so many different ways to teach a technique and to teach it. It's like, I don't feel comfortable commenting that far into it because there's more than one way to teach a guy. So
yeah, and
that's my opinion.
More than one way to win too.
Very much so. Yeah. Watch Orlando Brown try and then watch Jason Peters, right? Like, I mean, just totally different ways to win, and you can be successful in different ways.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say in terms of the feet in the butt thing, when you see that, is largely on the bull. Like, he doesn't have that ability to sort of bow up or buck up where he really can get his feet, behind his butt a little bit and, play from the hips and rotate, keeping his hands inside, get the chest plate. And that's really what you'd want to see against the bull is that a guy can drop his hips, bow his back and press up like that. And if your feet are just that too far forward, what you're going to see is a tackle get rocked back or rolled back towards the quarterback, right? He's a little high, his feet are a little bit far out. He can't sort of get them that 6 inches or so he needs to get back to sink and really set. And that's what we said against Borum in terms of the bull. He just doesn't deal with it really well. And one of the most interesting things I saw from Duke, he didn't say who it was, but I have a feeling I know who it was. He was working with this year's rookie class. And one of the guys that was the question was guard or tackle. And one of the reasons was he's not dealing with power really well. So he's not dealing with the bull really well. And he said, I told that player, and this goes back to there's different ways to win. I told that player to attack bull rushes like run blocking. As soon as he could tell it was going to be any kind of power rush, I said, do the same thing you do when it's a run block. And the guy was like, he's like, no, just do the same thing because you're really good at that. Right. And as soon as that player made that connection, I'm the same muscle memory. I'm just basically turning this into a run block. As soon as I have any indication he's really trying to come from my body, it worked. And he's like, now he's fine against the bull. And it was just, he was thinking of it like, I'm again, reflexive. I'm reactive. And he's like, no, you need to basically drop and push just like you do on a run game. And as soon as he made that connection, he said he's fine. And that was like one of his major checks, even on my scouting report, was like, does not deal with straight up power very well. And he's going to need to, because he's going to be playing, whether he's guard or tackle, he's going to be playing against some monsters that want to push into him. So there's different ways to get guys to win. There's different techniques for sure for them to employ. Borum's got to find whatever works. And he still doesn't, I would just say at this point, regardless of the technique discussion, he doesn't have what works against the bull consistently, because you see get pushed into the quarterback pretty often. So he's got to change something. And whatever it is, I don't care, but he's got to find a way to counter that, because until he does, he's going to have people do it to him, because that's what specifically defensive line coaches are going to see with his game and go, whatever you can do, get a long arm into his chest, like stand his ass up, and then, you're going to limit his effectiveness. That's the case.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I'm telling you, if you guys really want to get into nerdy offensive line stuff, like go watch other tackles, right? Like go watch some of these other guys across the league, and some of these guys that are thought of as good players, and then you watch them and you're like, huh? And then some guys that, are thought of as good players are really good players, right? I mean, like when the nerds say Mitchell Schwartz is a good player to watch, he really was. Like he was a lot of fun Mitchell Schwartz was really fun to watch. And I mean, Peters was fun to watch last year, even at 39 years old.
Amazing.
He was really fun to watch.
He won so many ways, and I would say improbably. Like he won in a lot of situations where you're like, he's not going to win. And he not only won, he like shut people down. And it was like, oh my God.
When the tackles going, like this is the kind of the crazy thing is you watch enough tackles and to me, they're all different positions, right? Like you can watching a guard's different, watching a tackle's different, but you watch a tackle and you watch him pass block a lot. And if the guy's just like really good and he's on a heater, right? Like, I mean, the guy, he has won the rep at the snap. Like that's like some of these guys are so good that like they get out of their stance and they have like set themselves up for success. And you're like, that guy, I mean, you can pause the tape. You're like, he's won already. Like that's how good some of these guys are. I know maybe that sounds weird to say, but you can just kind of tell with some of these guys that they get into this and like, if they get out of their stance and they're set up, perfectly. And it's like, there's nothing that defensive end can do. That some of those guys are that level.
You know who was like that in college, which is really funny? Plays for the Bears now. Whitehair.
Yeah. I could see that.
Whitehair was my scouting report on Cody Whitehair before he was drafted by the Bears is I wrote like watching paint dry. I watched something like 145 snaps of Cody Whitehair, which, where he played, that was 2.5 games because they threw the ball a lot. But it was literally stand up and set up, same motion, right? 2 steps, reps over. Stand up and set up, 2 steps, reps over. Stand up and set up, 2 steps, reps over for 100 and as many as I watched. I watched like 170. And like when my notes got really excited with a bunch of exclamation points, it's like 3 steps. Right? Guy moved him a 3rd step, like rolled him back, like so he had to put his left foot back once in an entire game. And I was like, dude, this guy is like, he is like a metronome, right?
Yeah.
And he played tackle in college. And I was just like, he is country strong. And he is like a metro. He is boring to watch. Like whoever you're watching against him is getting nothing. It's like watching a great corner against a wide receiver. And, Darrelle Revis in his prime, we're starting to see it from Sauce. Like this guy's not getting jack. If he gets 5 yards today, you're going to celebrate, right? It was the same way with Whitehair. If this guy gets one thing where he like turns his shoulders, I'm going to be like, woohoo, and that's what you want in a tackle. Like you want boring. You want, I know what's going to happen, and it's always the same thing, and good luck. Like long day, pack a lunch.
This is just funny.
I saw that. It's a great comment, Akusai. Yes. Nothing irks me more than people that believe zone is guarding a spot, which is called spot drop zone, which is completely worthless and really easy to tear apart. And I don't care whether I see it I don't even care if I see it in high school anymore because it's just not excusable. Like high school, college, pros, you still see it in the pros sometime. And you're like, literally, the guy's dropping to his spot. People are running by him and he's not reacting. No, zone is you guard the guy that's in your area. Like, right. And if the guy comes through, you do different things. There's pass offs. You do not like go, I need 10 yards of depth. I'll be here. Let people run in front of you and catch the ball. And they go, well, it was zone. No, it was poorly played zone. It drives me up a wall. And yes, Gibson was really good at that one thing.
I feel like we need to leave it there.
Probably.
Because it's funny.
Oh, God.
All right, guys, I appreciate it. Appreciate the time and attention. These are fun. They get a little long. We put a lot of time into them. But I think we're learning a lot. I'm certainly learning a lot from EJ hearing his breakdown. So hopefully you guys are too. And hopefully you guys are putting up with all my offensive line talk. So we'll get at it this week. I maybe we'll be back a day late. Well, I can't be back a day late because you're doing live streams. Monday Night Football, it might be tough to get it out on Wednesday night, given
we'll figure it out
after all 22, but we will do our best. And if it doesn't happen right away, then, we'll figure out a different time. Just tune in because Monday, everything gets thrown off. That's all I'm saying. Schedule gets weird when you have to push back days. So
can I do Kyle Duggar?
I mean, generally it's Bears over beers, not Pats.
I know this is what Kyle Duggar did to the Bears. That's going to be a Halloween horror movie. I bet.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right. Well, we'll see you next week, guys. Take care.